This is my sewing machine. I've had it for several years, I use it pretty frequently, and it is one of my most prized possessions. But it's not the only sewing machine that I have. I also have this antique hand crank machine, which I've had for a couple of years, but I've never actually used it to sew with. So today I want to see if I can actually make a finished product with this antique, and how it compares to my modern day electric machine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of this machine, just to give a bit of background and so we all understand what exactly we're working with. The first question that you probably have is, how old is this machine? And the short answer is, I don't know. The long answer is, I have a pretty good guess of a range of dates that I think it could have been manufactured during, but I still don't know. This was actually a Christmas gift from my dad a couple years ago. Shout out to my dad. If I recall correctly, the tag that was on it said Victorian sewing machine, which is very broad and not very descriptive. The Victorian era was a very long stretch of time. There's a lot of variation and change from the beginning of the time period to the end. It does have some Victorian-esque design elements. It's painted with this really pretty floral pattern. It's very reminiscent of like Art Nouveau and that sort of style, which was really popular in the late 19th, early 20th century. There's no brand name or serial numbers anywhere on the machine. The only info that is on the machine itself is on the work plate. There's a little engraving that says made in Germany. And then on the presser foot lever, there's a very small number 4 that's really hard to see, but it is there. Oh, another thing to note, if you've been wondering why the machine is so small, it's meant for children. It's a toy slash training device to teach kids how to sew, so it is not meant for adult use. Adult use sounds really weird. You know what I mean. So that means it's not really meant for like professional use to be making a bunch of garments and that sort of thing. I looked into German brands in the late 19th, early 20th century that made toy sewing machines. Two of the big names that I found were Müller and Kassiga, but also they're big names in this niche because they put identifiable information on their products so you can tell what brands they're from. So I feel like it's a safe guess to say that this machine is not Müller or Kassiga. So next I did a reverse image search. I took a photo of my machine and looked it up, and I was able to find 2 eBay listings for the exact same machine with all the exact same stenciling and designs on it. Neither of those sellers had any information about the brand or anything like that either. One of the listings gave the time period as early 20th century, and then the second listing said both pre-World War I and pre-1930, and World War I started in 1914, so that's pretty much smack dab in the middle between these other 2 date estimations that I found. And then additionally I found another toy sewing machine, not the same but very similar, in the Victoria and Albert Museum's collections, and they list it as being made between 1920 and 1930. I trust the V&A Museum to date items a little bit more than I trust some random eBay sellers. So based on all of that, my best guess is that this was made between 1900 and 1930, making it roughly 100 years old, give or take a decade or 2. I'm also pretty sure that this is a chain stitch machine, which means that unlike my modern electric machine where I have a top thread and a bobbin thread that goes on the bottom, and those 2 threads are intertwined together to make a lock stitch when the machine is sewing, this machine will only have a top thread and it will make a chain stitch. Most of the machines that I was looking at from this period are chain stitch machines. There's also nowhere to put a bobbin, so I feel pretty confident in my assumption. So that's everything that I know about this machine, but there's one important thing that I don't know, which is if it works, which is pretty integral to the whole concept of this video, so let's find out. Okay, so I've got my little sewing machine here. I'm gonna test it out and see if it actually works. I'm sure at this point in the video there's been some preamble and some more discussion about the machine and all the things that I know about it and don't know about it. I haven't recorded any of that yet because I don't know if it works. And if it doesn't, I can't really make a video about it. So I guess that's a bit of a spoiler. If you're watching this, then you can probably guess how this turns out, but I don't know yet. It's a bit of dramatic irony for you. This is the sewing machine. She's very small. She's very petite. It does turn when you crank the handle. Everything seems to move. And there is a needle in here, and it does have like a normal looking eye, like a regular sewing machine needle. It is a bit tarnished, so I don't know how old it is. It has the presser foot. It lifts and lowers with this little lever back here. I am assuming that this is a chain stitch machine since there doesn't seem to be anywhere to insert a bobbin, and from my research most hand crank toy machines were chain stitch machines. I have no idea how you're supposed to thread this. I can make some guesses based on my knowledge of sewing machines, so I'm going to try and thread it without looking anything up and hope I don't break it, and see how that goes. Just got some regular thread. This did come with a spool of like antique thread on here, so I know this is where the thread goes. I don't think these two pegs have anything to do with it, because this one is where the needle is attached to, and then this one is attached to the presser foot, so I don't think those have anything to do with the thread, but there is this little tiny guide loop over here. So I think the thread is supposed to go through there and then go into the eye of the needle. This doesn't have a needle threader like my domestic machine, so this is gonna take a while. I'm sure this is really exciting for you to watch. I do have needle threaders. I'm just choosing to not get one out and instead, oh. So that's that. Let me get a little piece of fabric. This is just a little scrap. I'm gonna lift the presser foot. There is little feed dogs in here, so that's super interesting. Put that in there, put down the presser foot. I guess this is the moment of truth here. Oh, it seems to be stitching. Oh my god, it works. I am noticing some issues. I need to use one hand to crank and another hand to hold it down as I crank, because otherwise it just moves around and I can't crank it. And so that means I don't have a hand free to guide the fabric. So that's gonna be interesting. Also, you can tell just by pulling on it, those stitches want to come out really easily, but look at that. Can you see those? It's the underside of the fabric. Those are some nice little chain stitches. I'm just gonna use the ends of my scissors and pull that last loop on my last stitch up. So that should hopefully lock them in a bit. It's kind of a long stitch length in comparison to what I would normally use on my electric machine, but let me try and see if I can like sew two things together. I just started reaching over with my foot for the machine pedal, like, okay, I'm gonna sew. Wrong machine. I guess I'll just stitch down the long edge, make a little tube. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to like stabilize it. Oh, it's not moving. Okay, that's something to know. The feed dogs don't start for a little bit under the presser foot. Okay, it's gotta be kind of a ways under there. There we go. It's really uneven. Maybe if I put it on top of like a piece of fabric. Let me just set it on here. That is much more fun at the very least. But yeah, that keeps it from wobbling and walking around quite so much. It kind of helps. And there's no way to backstitch with a chain stitch machine as far as I know. There we go. Yeah, that's secure. Whoa. That one's not. It's very wonky. It's like slanted. Very off kilter, you can tell. It's kind of slanting off to the side. This end is not quite stitched all the way to the edges of the fabric, but I guess I could just put it back in the machine and sew the other way. The needle does not go up very much. Oh! Well, I was trying to pull some of the fray bits of the fabric off and I just grabbed the thread tail and yanked the whole stitching out. Well, that just means I get to redo it and have more practice cranking. Oh, there we go. See, okay. It's going through that last loop all the way, so it locks. Pretty decent seam. Let me turn it inside out. Like if I pull the seam open, you can see the stitches because it's a contrasting thread. But if I used a matching thread, you would not be able to see those at all. It works. That's all that really matters at this point. I will figure out how to make this a bit more usable. Make sure it's not all slipping and sliding around while I'm working with it so I can actually crank it and feed the fabric through at the same time. So I will figure that out and get back to you. Okay, so now that I know that the machine actually works, I'm going to make a little project using it. I've been wanting to make a little set of patchwork quilted coasters for a while. I think they'd be really cute. I've got all the materials I'll need, so I've gone ahead and picked out a couple different fabrics that I want to use for this project. I've also got some cotton batting that I'm going to use for these, and since I'm going to be making multiples of the exact same thing, I think this is going to be a really good way to compare how the chain stitch machine works versus my regular electric sewing machine. I'm hoping to make 6 of the coasters, maybe 4 or 5, depending on how much fabric I have, and I want to make half of them on the electric machine and half of them with the hand crank machine. I actually don't know if it's in frame here. The hand crank machine, you were just looking at it. You should remember what it looks like. If you don't, you should call someone about that. So that is the plan. I have drafted out a pattern for the patchwork that I want to do. It's just a super simple geometric pattern of squares. So the next step is going to be ironing all my fabric and getting my pieces cut out. As I said, I assembled this first coaster with my electric machine just to figure out the process without the addition of trying to work out how to use the hand crank machine. I was also trying out a quilting technique called nesting seams, where you press the seam allowances of 2 patchwork sections in opposite directions from each other before sewing them together. This lets you align the seam lines more precisely as the allowances sort of interlock or nest into each other. It did really help with getting clean seam lines, but the patchwork doesn't lie as smooth and flat as it would if I had pressed all the seams open instead. I don't think it's something I'll do with patchwork projects moving forward, but I did use it for the rest of the coasters for the sake of consistency. With all the patchwork sewn, I cut out a back piece of the same size from the green fabric, sewed it to the front all around the edges, leaving a small gap, then clipped the corners and turned it right side out. Then I cut out a piece of cotton batting slightly smaller than the coaster, stuffed it inside, and closed up the gap by hand. So that is one coaster down with the electric machine. I meant to time myself and see how long that would take. I forgot to do that, so I'm gonna do that with the chain stitch machine, and then I'll make another one with the electric machine and time that, and then we can compare the difference in the time. But that means it is time to try and actually make a full piece with the chain stitch machine, and I think I have figured out a way to prevent it wobbling around, hopefully. I'm pretty sure this will work, but we'll have to see. My plan to stabilize the chain stitch machine was to attach it to a piece of scrap wood, then clamp that down to my work table. The base of the machine has these decorative cutouts on the front and back, so I marked out 2 points on the board for each cutout, then drilled holes at those points. Then I could feed wire through those holes and through the cutouts on the machine to attach them together, making sure to add some fabric between the wire and the machine base to avoid scratching the paint. Okay, I got the machine. I'm gonna go ahead and thread it, and then I will start the timer. Be so proud of me. I dug out a needle threader. Machine. Threaded. Pieces. Prepped. Timer. Start. I don't think you can see that from where you are, but it's happening, I promise. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, that's not under the feed dogs. Yeah, at all. Here we go. Much better with it secured, I will say that. It does wiggle a little bit, but much less. Ooh, can I chain piece with the chain stitching? Cause I won't have a tail to secure it. Pardon me, my head's definitely in the middle of the shot now. This thing is not the easiest to use. It's almost like it was, oh, it's already coming unraveled. Ah. 1. It's been 4 minutes. It's not even a very good seam either. One stitch that's way bigger than the rest. Uh-oh. Bunched up in there. Yep, it's wrapped around a little mechanism too many times. I turn the crank, the needle goes down, and the thread loops around that little mechanism down below. But after a few stitches, it's been getting caught. And yeah, see, it's stuck. I don't know why. I was thinking I was gonna be making at least half of these coasters with the hand crank machine. It's been 20 minutes and I've barely done anything, so that was a bad noise. that's a that. I'm a done. This is all I can take for tonight. We shall reconvene on the morrow. It's the next day. I was well rested, but then I did some other stuff this morning to work on other projects, and now I'm back to this. So I'm tired again, but we must persevere. There were several issues I experienced while working with the chain stitch machine. The feed dogs, the bumpy metal bits under the presser foot that moves the fabric forward through the machine, would only work if there was at least a ½ inch or so of fabric past the needle, so I couldn't sew a full seam from start to finish. I tried to remedy that by sewing a single stitch, then lifting the presser foot and moving the fabric forward manually, but this typically led to the machine jamming, which was another issue I encountered. It jammed. A lot. The best solution I found to the feed dog issue was to sew every seam starting a bit past the beginning point, then flip the fabric around and sew the unstitched section from the opposite direction. The needle also didn't go up very high, so there was very little space to fit the fabric under it. I did try to raise the needle up a bit at one point to fix this, but then the needle couldn't go down far enough to loop thread on the little lever underneath the machine that actually makes the chain stitches, so the whole machine was rendered non-functional, and it took me so much fiddling to get the needle back into its proper place. It was also very finicky to remove fabric from the machines, since when the needle was in its highest position, the thread was looped snugly around the loop catcher lever underneath. I could turn the hand wheel to loosen the thread from the lever, but that would drop the needle back through the fabric. So I had to move the needle as high as it could go, then use a lace weight crochet hook to unpick the thread from the lever so the fabric could be pulled free from the machine. And then I would have to be very careful pulling it free because chain stitches unravel very easily. Each stitch is secured by looping around the next stitch, and the last stitch on the chain is unsecured until you slip the thread tail through that last loop and pull it tight. So if you accidentally pull on the thread before tying it off, the whole row of stitches will come out. This meant I needed to leave long thread tails at each end of every line of stitching, and remember it's 2 lines of stitching for every seam, so that got very rat's nesty very quickly. That also meant I couldn't chain piece, where you keep sewing pieces together without cutting the thread in between, which makes sewing a ton of patchwork pieces much quicker. Instead, I had to stop between each seam, remove the fabric, and then start the next one, which made the whole process much longer. I also had to sit on the floor the whole time, because I had to mess with the mechanisms under the work plate so often that ended up being easier than sitting in a chair. And while going through all that frustration, I had a thought. I think it might have been faster to hand stitch this. You know what? I'm gonna hand stitch another one of these. I'm gonna finish this one. I'll do another one on the electric machine so I can time it, and then I'm gonna hand stitch the 4th one. Just to see, because I swear to God, it's gonna be faster than this. The patchwork was finally complete, so I gave it a good press and then cut out a backing piece, which was desperately needed to cover all of those thread tails. Then a final bit of chain stitching to attach the front and back. Then I could turn it out, add the batting, and close up the gap, which thankfully I got to do by hand. 3 hours and 18 minutes is the final time for one patchwork coaster on the hand crank machine. So now I'm going to make another one on the electric machine and see how long that takes. 42 minutes. That's a fifth of the time it took on the hand crank machine. I wasn't necessarily trying to go as fast as possible, but there were some points where I could have really slowed down and really fiddled with it and been really meticulous, and I did not do that. But it came out perfectly fine. I don't think there's frankly a noticeable difference between this and if I had been very, very meticulous with it. Electric machine is faster, no surprise there. But now let's see how long it will take me to make one coaster fully by hand. I used a standard hand sewing needle for this and the same thread I've been using for both machines to make fairly small running stitches. I think a backstitch might have resulted in neater seam lines on the finished product, but frankly, I couldn't be bothered. The assembly process is the exact same as with the previous coasters, so instead of explaining that for a 3rd time, I'm going to talk about another project I have planned. So my channel recently hit 30,000 subscribers, which thank you all by the way, and to celebrate that milestone, I want to do another video where I make a costume based off of y'all's responses to a survey. I did this about a year ago when the channel hit 10,000 subscribers, and it was so much fun, so I want to do it again. I want to update the survey to make sure I don't get the same results as last time, just to spice things up a little. So right now I'm looking for ideas for other questions to include, so I thought I'd pose the topic to all of you to get some more suggestions. I made a post on Patreon recently that goes more in depth. I'll link that below if you want to check it out. It's available to everyone. You don't need to be a paid member. You don't even need a Patreon account to read it, but if you want to leave a comment on the post, you will need to make an account and potentially join as a free member. remember. I'm not totally sure. You can also leave suggestions in the comments here on this YouTube video, but there is a greater risk of me not seeing them since the Patreon post is just more contained. Please let me know if you have any ideas for design elements I can poll you all on. I'm planning on publishing that survey when I post my next video in 2 weeks, so stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to try this out again and see what you all come up with. Okay, so the fully hand-sewn coaster is complete, and it took me 2 hours and 42 minutes to finish. That is pretty close to the time it took on the chain stitch machine, but still a little bit less, so I was right. It is faster to hand sew one of these than it was to make one on the chain stitch machine. But sewing isn't all about speed, it's about the craftsmanship and the experience of working with your hands and creating something. And unfortunately, the chain stitch machine was also the worst on both of those metrics as well. The chain stitch machine, I talked about it already, it jammed a lot, it skipped stitches, the stitches unraveled super easily. It wasn't a pleasant experience most of the time. It did have points where it worked really well for a brief period of time, and that was very fun. It was really cool to like use something that's so old and is still functional, and to get to see the mechanics and machinery moving. It's fairly simple overall, but getting to see all the moving pieces working together in tandem when they were working together in tandem was very neat. But the novelty did wear off pretty quickly, and I started to miss all of the modern conveniences of my electric machine. It is important to remember, of course, this is a toy, it's not an actual professional or domestic machine. It's meant for children. I've never used one that's not a toy for children, so I can't compare the experiences, but I'm assuming they work a bit better and are a bit more finely tuned. Craftsmanship of the chain stitched coaster is also the worst out of the bunch. The stitches are all really loose, so you can see the thread from the front of the work, and it was also really difficult to sew straight seams, so all the lines are a little bit wonky, and it's just overall not very clean in comparison to all of the other pieces. The hand-sewn one was really nice to work on. It was very like slow and meditative and like really allowed me to get very precise and neat with all of my work, which was nice. But I don't think the finished product is significantly neater and more precise than the ones that I did on the electric. One significant difference between the coasters that I did on the electric machine and the ones I did by hand and with the chain stitch machine is that they're smaller. They're all like a 1/4 inch in both dimensions smaller. I don't know exactly how that happened. I'm assuming I made my seam allowances a little bit bigger on the electric machine, but I marked out all of my seam allowances, like with heat erase pen. I did lose some of them because I had to iron my seams, but I marked them all out. I was following those lines as I was sewing. Unless there's something else that happened, I have no idea. They're a tiny bit smaller. It's not that big of a deal. I had cut out patchwork pieces for 6 coasters, and I only made 4 in this video, so I went ahead and finished those last 2 on the electric machine just to get them done. I didn't film any of that process, but I did time it. Those 2 took me 59 minutes and 55 seconds, so just under an hour, which is a bit longer than it took to do the one on the electric, which took me 42 minutes, but it's not double, as you might expect, because I was able to chain piece all of my patchwork and work assembly line style, which made things much more efficient, which is something that made working on the chain stitch machine so frustrating because I couldn't chain piece. Also important to note that filming anything makes the process take longer because you have to like set up your shots and think about what you're doing and what the angles are. It just adds a little bit more time to everything. So not filming the last 2 that I did on the electric machine might have made the process a little bit faster, but it all comes out in the wash, and none of this is at all scientific. I really hope you didn't click on this video expecting scientific comparisons. I'm real sorry if you did. But thank you for sticking around to the end of the video, because we're at the end of the video now. Hello, yes, the end of the video. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can subscribe or leave a comment or a like, whatever buttons you feel like clicking down below. An extra special thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon, especially those in the Magnanimous Maelstroms tier: Marjin Rue, Oscar, Obi-Nick Kenobi, Evelyn, Trapped in the Midwest, Bear Hardy, and Perfect Primrose. My Patreon will be linked down below, in addition to that post about the survey that I talked about earlier, so if you want to read that to find out more. If you have any suggestions for new questions I could add, or additions I can make to existing questions, please leave any ideas you have down below. I would love to hear it. The survey should be up in 2 weeks, and then I'm planning on 2 weeks of time to take it, and then I have no idea how long it's going to take me to actually make the project, because I don't even know what the project is. So if you want to see it, you have to subscribe. It's the only way you're going to be able to see the video. You just have to, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Ow. I gotta stop doing that. Unfortunately, it's so funny.